Good evening, everyone. I'll get the boring part out of the way while these guys are moving the stage around and getting ready for our discussants tonight. Let's have another round of applause for Taiko Kai. And I appreciate them not just because they're great musicians, but they have been super helpful in facilitating Shoji Kameda's residency this quarter. They've worked every Tuesday and Thursday to bring the drums across the street from the Ethnic Cultural Center to the Cultural Theater, back again. They helped me in designing a whole application process for this visiting artist residency. Never really done before. And many other people from the regional Taiko group in Seattle and the various different community groups participated in that. And I'm just really grateful at all the investment that people made in this residency and the way that they have worked. It's been really easy for me, especially the students, as I say, put a huge amount of time into this residency project. So we're about to bring up some very eminent people of the Taiko world here to talk about the changing tradition. I want to first of all thank our community artists in residence, Shoji Kameda, who has been working his butt off here in Seattle for the last 8 weeks, and got a couple more to go. I hope he can keep up the pace that he's been teaching twice a week here in the evening with his full group, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday teaching private lessons up in the School of Music. He's been working with the Taiko Kai group. How many days a week do you guys rehearse? 2 or 3 plus some private lessons. Yeah. And he's been teaching almost every weekend at a community site out off campus as well. So he's had a huge impact on he's been here, and we just feel really lucky to have Shoji Kameda with us. He's a Grammy-nominated musician, composer, producer, and he started playing Taiko at the age of 8 and has spent over 30 years teaching and performing Taiko throughout. And as I mentioned, we had this sort of process of selection that included a lot of applicants who were really eminent in the Taiko world. And Shoji was the person that was chosen by all the people that participated in that process, as I said, mostly from the community Taiko groups here in Seattle. So I feel that we've really got the best of the best here. Shoji will be joined tonight in this discussion called Taiko's Core Values Beyond Roots by Shikuma, who is a longtime Taiko musician and activist based here in Seattle, went to the University of Washington, and really lucky to have somebody here who can talk about the history of Taiko in the Pacific Northwest specifically. And we've also very fortunate tonight to have with us Deborah Wong, who is an ecologist from the University of California, Riverside. She recently published her latest book called Louder and Faster, Pain, Joy, and the Body Politics in Asian American Taiko. And she says that her happiest hours are spent hosting the weekly radio show Gold Mountain for KUCR 88.3 FM. All right, welcome our panelists, please.
Are these foods for the live stream? For the live stream?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you introduced yourself, Shannon. That was Professor Shannon Dudley, who was a professor of ethnomusicology at UW, and a longtime friend. And isn't it great that he's been able to make happen along with the support of, several other departments, right? The Department of Asian Languages and Literature, and also the support of the Taiko Community Alliance that's looking after the live feed for tonight.
And American Ethnic Studies as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good catch. Yeah. Let's do a quick check. Gregory Wada, who is somewhere not here looking after the remote stuff. Gregory, if there's any problems, could you maybe text me? And also, we didn't talk about how, when we get to the questions and discussion part of all of this later, right? If anyone who's watching the live stream would like to ask a question or make a comment, perhaps, Gregory, you could text me or one of us. That might be one way to do it. Yeah. Okay. What to say? Taiko Kai! Taiko Kai! get to talk about Taiko, and we just got to watch Taiko, and I get to hang out with Taiko players, and it doesn't get better than this. So, yeah. Could you each tell us a bit about those two pieces? I mean, Oyage and Stan, why don't we start with you? Tell us, you wrote that piece, right?
Yeah, so we played, that first piece was called Kaeru, which means frog in Japanese, and it's loosely based on an Okinawan folktale called Kaeru no Tsuhiki, or Frog's Tug of War. And the origins of it in the early 90s, when three friends of mine, dancers, Saiko Kobayashi, Yoko Morao, and Haruna Takamori, wanted to do a performance piece / dance piece based on this folktale of frogs and farmers hit by a double catastrophe of drought and a plague of insects, each of which was threatening to destroy the rice paddies which both frogs and farmers depended on. And so the Frog King decides to join forces with the farmers, but he felt he had to stand on two legs so he could see eye to eye with the farmers. And long story short, they get together, they hold a tug of war, it pleases the rain gods, the rains come and wash away the insects, ends the drought. And I've always wondered why Okinawan rain gods like tug of wars, but I could never find that out. Anyway, so they did this 25-minute performance piece and asked what was then known as Kokon Taiko Ensemble, basically me and Bill Lava, to do the score for it. So we came up with 25 minutes. Basically, it was a soundtrack to a performance piece. And after it was done, then we decided, well, you know, there's a lot of interesting sections to it. So basically, Kaeru became a sort of amalgamation of these different scenes, that 25-minute piece, and now it's a 5-minute piece. But the idea is that there's like, in the beginning you hear the percussion, so it's kind of like the rice paddy in the morning, and insects start croaking and waking up, and then you hear the rain and the thunder, and then there's the tug of war, so we're going one side and then the other side. And then the festival part where we're all jumping around and we're happy. Yeah, that's kind of. Oh, and the reason Taiko Kai plays it is because I teach a youth group called Kaze Daiko. And we started in year 2000, I believe. And 3 of my Kaze Daiko students all went to, 3 sisters, Matsudaira sisters, all went to UW, and there was no Taiko here at that time. So they said, well, let's start our own Taiko group on campus. And they did that, so Taiko Kai, one of their first pieces was Kaeru.
Right. We're gonna come back to the matter of Stan's foundational place in the Pacific Northwest Taiko scene in just a bit. But thank you for explaining the piece, and I loved it. I had never seen it before. I mean, I'm very SoCal-centric in my understanding of Taiko, but I especially loved what I now know is the tug of war move. That was very cool. Yeah. Shoji, your piece, Oyage, tell us about it.
Okay, so way back in the early 2000s, I was a part of the very first Taiko project, touring, I guess it was like, yeah, it was a project, Taiko project. So in that era, there was like a bunch of like, I'm the first generation of kids basically that grew up with Taiko here in the United States. And there was a bunch of us kind of coming of age in our early 20s, in the early 2000s. And Brian Yamami organized this Taiko project basically. The idea was to get a bunch of all these kind of youngish Taiko players together that were kind of serious in the art form and put together a touring show and like travel it around as like a, and actually one of our first performances was here at Union Hall at Seattle. And so the end piece of that first touring, that first project, the first tour, was omiyage, and then so omiyage, is it's represents like the tradition of gift giving in Japan. So if you go to visit somebody's house, you got to bring omiyage. If you go on vacation, you're supposed to bring omiyage from the place you went on vacation for all your coworkers and stuff. And so the idea was like when Taiko Project toured around, we would leave this song with the different communities that Taiko Project toured. And then a few years later, we can kind of get into this, but this kind of will fit very nicely into our talk about what the Taiko values are, what our community values are. So I started thinking about how I could encourage some of the values that I felt like were really important in the Taiko community. And one of them, I think, is there is a real tradition of generosity in the and especially in, I think, Stan's era and that whole pioneering era. Sorry, Stan, I don't want to make you feel old, but I mean that in the most respectful and honoring way.
Way back when.
Yeah, way back when there was gods and frogs and tug of war. But I think really like Taiko wouldn't survive in the United States without a lot of people just helping each other out. Like that's really it, like sharing resources, teaching, and just this spirit and culture of generosity. And then and so I started thinking about how I could try to encourage those values that I felt like were really important. And so I decided to call omiyage it was the first like open source Taiko piece. So I don't use that language anymore, like open source language. We can talk about that later too. But the idea is still the same. So the song is like you're free to perform it. You're free to teach it. You can get paid doing workshops on omiyage. And the only rule was that if you took it on, if your group played it, you couldn't add more restrictions to it. You had to give it away in the same way that it was given to you. And so I decided to release it kind of a bigger idea of instead of just one group touring and leaving a piece. Like what if we could what would it look like to have an idea like that? So I'm gonna try to encode some of those values in the piece we shared. And since that time,
I would say you succeeded wholesale. I mean, was that what, 2005?
Yeah,
Like that?
I can't remember
Somewhere
exactly when.
Yeah.
2005.
And I mean, the thing that you very generously not said is that there were a few other groups that were suddenly very forcefully asserting ownership of certain repertoire, right? In Japan and in North America, and you were, I think, responding to that at a certain level, and rather than sort of studying the argument, you just created a different kind of piece, and that piece has now had a very long life and a long reach in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, and I think that that way of I totally understand the people and the artists and the groups that want to have control over the way that the material gets shared, because there is something about really properly learning a style and really devoting some time into it. And I totally respect people that feel that way and want to have a more kind of controlled way in which their style or their repertoire gets shared. But that's just not where I want to be. That's all, And then I also felt like I do want to represent this other part of the community that is very giving, that is give it up first and then see what happens kind of feel, as opposed to train with me until you get perfect. Okay, now you can do it, So I want to, encourage that other.
Again, I'm going to say you succeeded, and by modeling what it could mean to create something that was literally for everyone, but it's also been literally community building because so many groups play a piece now, right? So that different groups can come together and know this piece already and play together. That's deep.
Yeah, I just like to add that I'm pretty sure that omiyage is one of the most widely played songs, universally, around the world. good one, because you've taught it in Europe and you've taught it in all over North America.
Well, and it's not just me. I have to, there's a lot of the original Taiko Project folk. Taiko Project is still they're still going strong, and they, tour with Omiyage and perform it around. So they've done a lot, and Yuta Kato has also really put in a lot of his time and energy into the piece, and he's really taken it in a whole different direction. And of course, taught it at Asano Taiko US. So it's not just me that that spread it. It's really been a really wide.
And it's kind of generous of you to say that. I think that's true as well. I think there's a couple of other pieces like Korikara, Michelle Fuji and Walter Clark, and Chris, that have had similar sort of circulation, and community building.
That piece was right around that same era. It was a little bit after, one of the Taiko conferences right after it, and that was a very intentional, creation to share at that conference as well. So it's been,
So what's already coming through is what we want to talk about, among many other things tonight, are core values, and the Taiko community. And many of us in North America and beyond do use that phrase, right? The Taiko community. We think of Taiko players as groups of people that are connected to one another in certain ways. We're going to come to the matter of what some of those core values are. But first, I'd like to just continue to sort of lay the groundwork just a little bit and ask, how long have you two known each other? How long have you been crossing paths? A while.
I think Shoji was,
it's been a while.
Middle school when I first met him.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I was definitely taller than him when I first met him.
When was the first time we met? I wouldn't know, actually.
I don't know.
Yeah, Stan's always been in my life.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's real, there's generational differences on the stage, right? And the North American Taiko community is just reaching that point where there are actually 3 generations, give or take.
Yeah.
And you came to Taiko as an adult, I assume, right?
Yeah, I didn't start playing Taiko till I got to Seattle in '81, so I was in my mid or late 20s by then. My son started playing when he was 2.
And you started as a kid.
I started as a kid, yeah. So my first Taiko teachers were Jeannie Mercer and Russell Baba, and their son Masato Baba and I grew up. Well, not just the 2 of us, actually my sisters as well. We all grew up playing Taiko together. And Jeannie and Russell had learned from Seiichi Tanaka at the San Francisco Taiko Dojo. They were one of his first kind of set of really hardcore students. And then they left the San Francisco Taiko Dojo, as many early Taiko Dojo students did. Tanaka sensei would bring them in and train them up really good, and then there would be some falling out, and they moved to a different city and started a new Taiko group. That's basically how Taiko got started in North America, or one of the main basic ways. So they did that and started a Taiko group up in Mount Shasta, California, which is where we were all living. And so I think Shasta Taiko was the first, we say, dedicated kids group, because there was no other. It wasn't a mixed adults kids group. It was strictly a kids group in North America.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
To me, what's really interesting about Shoji and Stan is the way in which you obviously share a lot of values and ideas and all that, but also have very significant. Your paths have been different, in really interesting ways to me. You starting as a child, Taiko has essentially always been part of your life, as I understand it. And you've consistently, Shoji, innovated. Not only in terms of creating open source, open access pieces, but your work with One Ensemble and sort of creating spaces where really, professional level skilled musicians could create together for Taiko was groundbreaking, and so on and so forth. And Stan, I mean, I don't know you very well yet, and I'm hoping that tonight is the beginning of a change, but I've long respected you and sort of watched you from afar. And my sense of you, and I want to have you tell your own story, but my sense of you is that you're a taiko player, a taiko leader, a writer, and an activist. And I wonder if you'd be willing to show us the t-shirt that's underneath that very cool kind of happy coat. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you show everybody. Yeah, yeah. Tell us about Suda for Solidarity you're involved in too.
Sure. So Suda for Solidarity, everyone knows what Suda is. It's, well, in this context, it's the origami paper cranes that we fold, made famous by the story of Sadako, the child who was in the Hiroshima bombing and got cancer. And the story is if you fold 1,000 cranes, then you'll have a long life. So she got up to like 960 cranes and then she died. But so in Hiroshima, there's a monument to her, and schools all over Japan will fold 1,000 cranes and bring them and hang them at the statue or around the memorial there. So, so because of that, and even preceding that, Suda kind of symbolized life, hope, and peace. So Suda for Solidarity is sort of our, it's a Japanese-American-based organization that formed officially in 2019, but we really got started in 2018, following two things. One is the Muslim ban that the Trump administration wanted to implement was, after the third tribe, okayed by the Supreme Court. And the second thing was the zero tolerance policy, where to prevent people from coming across the border, the government decided that they would intentionally separate kids from their parents if the family crossed the border. There's this kind of obscene idea that if you make it painful enough for people crossing the border, that they'll stop crossing the border. And what could be more painful than taking your kid away from you and never returning them? So that really struck a chord with a lot of people in the Japanese American community, because we remember in 1942 when, after Pearl Harbor, after Pearl Harbor, a lot of the Issei men, the fathers, the husbands, got taken away and families got separated. And we remember the awful racism that was directed towards the Japanese community, much like it was being directed towards Muslims after 9/11. And just kind of pasting everybody with this, you're bad, you're evil, all of you are that way kind of attitude. And so we decided that we needed to do something. And so kind of spontaneously, starting in the pilgrimages, Tule Lake pilgrimage, the Minidoka pilgrimage, and Heart Mountain pilgrimage, people started kind of protesting the zero tolerance policy and the Muslim ban. And then it started happening in communities in LA and Chicago, New York, and Seattle. And so after a while, we decided that, well, we should all do something together, and so we formed Suda for Solidarity. And this last week, we did a week called Day of Remembrance, Week of Action, where on Friday we went and did a demonstration from the federal building downtown Seattle. On Sunday, we did the community program at the Puyallup Fairground, which was a temporary detention facility in 1942. And then on Tuesday, we went to the airport, which is being used for deportation flights. So kind of this day of remembrance, but week of action. As Japanese Americans kind of say that detention is wrong, separation of families is wrong, treating people as less than human is wrong.
What is it? Never again is now.
Yeah, some of our slogans are never again is now, stop repeating history, and kodomo no tameni, or for the sake of the children.
Thank you for your work on that. As I understand it, you're a local, co-organizer for Suda?
Yeah, I'm a co-chair of the Child and Family Detention Campaign at Center for Solidarity. We have 4 campaigns. And I'm also, I was co-president of the local JCL chapter, but this year I'm running. Now I'm a vice president.
Yeah, really stepped back there, huh? I mean, this is a leader we're looking at here, you know, in Taiko and far beyond. And my sense, again, watching from afar, is that for you these are, to some extent, interconnected activities. You know, they are part of a life path where these things are, you know, touch one another, right? You know, and I should say that not all Taiko players are like, you know, political, right? You know? But I think that one of the things we might talk about tonight are the ways in which Taiko starts as a Japanese, sort of Japanese-American cultural form, and then moves out, becomes more broadly Asian-American, and then has kept moving, right? You know, so those are some of the things we kind of wanted to touch on tonight. But I wanted to, before I forget, to alert the audience that I think you just had an op-ed come out a couple of days ago.
Yeah, there was an op-ed in the Seattle Times, I believe on Sunday.
Okay. Day of Remembrance Detention.
A Day of Remembrance op-ed.
Yeah. Okay. Look it up.
Mike Ishii and I co-authored.
Okay. Okay. I believe it's not your first. So yeah. I mean, this is sort of giving you all a sense that this is a community leader in multiple ways. Is my point. Yeah. Before we turn, I know it's like a tease. I keep saying we're going to talk about programs, but could you tell us before I forget, before I give you a chance to say so, what are your plans for the residency? I mean, don't you have a couple of big public performances coming up? And like, I don't want to forget to get that out on the table.
Yeah, there'll be my final, the class that I'm teaching here is going to have a final performance on March 5th. And Taiko Kai is going to play that there as well. So it's going to be, at the musicology class that I'm teaching, they'll perform 3 pieces from this classic Taiko repertoire. And then Taiko Kai will perform a couple of the pieces I've been working with them this quarter on. And then I'm coming back on March 30th for a collaboration with Giselle Wires and I'm gonna mess up their names, but choral group here at University of Washington. And so we're gonna do a taiko and choral performance with members of the Seattle taiko community, hopefully out in the the main square.
Really?
The cherry blossoms on March 30th. The quad, that's what it's called.
Surrounded by cherry blossoms. Wait, since taiko and a chorus?
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
Who wrote the piece? What is the piece?
Okay, there's a couple pieces we're gonna do. One is called To the Memory, and another one was written by a good friend of mine and super amazing composer, Christopher Tin. And if anybody's into video games, he wrote the theme for Civilization. God, which one was it though? Oh, Chris is gonna kill me. But it's a really good theme. And he's gone on. He's a very successful composer, and he's done not just choral work, but all kinds of stuff now. But I would say his base is in that world. And when we were at Stanford, he played taiko in the Stanford taiko. So that's how I know him. So he has some taiko connections, and a lot of his work, there's been little bits of taiko in there. And so we're doing one of his pieces. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's going to be outside?
It'll be outside. Yeah.
Oh my God. I wish I could.
Yeah. March 30th.
Okay. Wow, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And you're connecting with so many different taiko groups and ensembles in the area. That is really impressive.
Yeah, no, I mean, the taiko scene here in Seattle, I've been very impressed with. It's it really seems like there's a lot of energy here. There's a lot of really great players, a lot of groups forming, really healthy collegiate taiko scene. It's been really, really great to just get to know the Seattle taiko scene better and just see all the potential here. Yeah.
I see every sign that you just dove right in. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know what I forgot to ask at the outset is when should we all be going out the door later tonight? I want to sort of work back and make sure that you all have a chance to ask questions and all that kind of thing. I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock, 8:30? Okay, so let's maybe talk for another 15 minutes or so, and then,
Sounds great.
yeah, questions, discussion with the audience. I think that the three of us share an understanding that Taiko, at this point, Kuminaiko, is a form that is not sitting still. It's not fossilized. It's not something that most Taiko people are trying to like hold in place in any way.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about what are some of the shared values, as well as the significant differences, across the Taiko scenes, plural. Because Taiko is now very present in Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, certain parts of the first world, but let's start with North America. And what do you two see as some of the core values, shared values, those kinds of things in the Taiko community?
Well, yeah, I think Shoji already touched on it. One of them is, I guess you call it collegiality or collaboration, sharing of, so I'm not in the pioneer groups like San Francisco Taiko Dojo, Hinata Taiko in LA, San Jose Taiko, the three premier pioneer groups, late 60s, early 70s. So I started playing in 81, and at that time I think we were the 12th group in North America to form. And back then it was like, if you were going to another city where there was a Taiko group, then you knew you had a place to stay.
Yeah.
Because you could just say, hey, I'm with Seattle Taiko, and I'm dropping by LA, I'm dropping by I'm dropping by Vancouver, and have a place I can crash. And they would say, yeah, sure, and we would reciprocate. If anyone came to Seattle, you're a Taiko player? Yeah, you can stay at my place. We'll take you out to dinner. And we didn't necessarily know every single person in every group, but we knew every other group in the country, because it was that small. So there was that beginning, and for us in Seattle, we were particularly tight with Katari Taiko in Vancouver, BC, because they formed 1 year ahead of us. And they invited Tanaka Sensei up to teach them, and we kind of piggybacked. One of our members went up to videotape what they were doing. It was sweet. But at that time, they didn't mind. So there was that feeling of sharing, and so we always used to say, Katari Taiko is our big sister group. And they would come and do workshops with us, and then we'd go visit them. So in the early days, it was a very tight community because there were so few of us. And at that time, there were no professional groups, and it was almost impossible to get any Taiko material. You had to make your own drums. You had to, if you wanted to get a recording of another Taiko group, San Francisco or Hinata or San Jose, you had to go and record it yourself with VHS tape. And because there were no CDs, there were no records, there was nothing for sale anyway.
There was no YouTube.
Yeah, and no internet. So, yeah.
I think for me, I would say Stan and I are both Japanese American, obviously, but I think for me, I associate especially the pioneering groups and pioneering generation, it really did come from a Japanese American perspective, and that to me, that's those are my people. That's my community. That's my I think it's also what it means to be Japanese American also is kind of undergoing this change and questioning, because one, we're a very small group, and then there was a bunch of people that came over, and then all the immigration gets shut off, and so it's all these older families that kind of have this shared experience through being multiple generations here in America, going through the war experience, blah blah blah. but we're a very small group. There isn't like a constant, there aren't like numbers immigrating from Japan to really refresh the community. We have
Like Chinese, like Filipinos.
yeah,
right?
exactly. We have the highest rate of outmarriage of any ethnic group in the United States. And so I think that's something that's happening within the Japanese American community too, is like it's getting a lot more diverse, right? Like it's not unusual to have tons of mixed marriages in your family, and I see that same thing happening in the Taiko community as well. It's like it's spreading. It's like really, I think it has to change. It has to adapt. It has to our identity, our values, our community has to be flexible enough to like adapt to a new environment and to like go beyond like the small community that it came from. And but in doing that, we have to like kind of rethink some of our values. We think about okay, what's really important here, what's not. Let's keep the really important stuff. Let's discard the not stuff. And so I think that it's a process that is kind of mirrored in the Japanese American community and the Taiko community.
I agree.
Yeah.
And this, we are at a moment where like there are multiple forms of Kumitaiko, even though there are also shared ideas. Are you, may I ask, are you Yonsei? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And are you Sensei?
I'm Samson.
Okay. And I'm actually not Japanese American at all, right? I'm Haole multi-ethnic Chinese American, but as I always say, 100% Asian American. Oh yeah. And I went to Taiko in search of Asian American community.
Yeah.
And I went to it because I had, the work experience that so many Asian Americans have when they hear Taiko for the first time, is it just blew me away. It just spoke to me so deeply. I mean, like a really deep, powerful response of, tears and, wanting to do that right away. And I went in search of a group once I moved to Southern California. I started playing in 1997. And one of the things I loved from the get-go, I wanted it and I found it, was the kind of music making that was not about the ego and the I. It was about the us. It's about, like parking your ego at the door and putting the group before oneself. And, I was trained in Western classical art music initially as a, school-age kid, and so the concept of like a practice room where you go by yourself and just woodshed, it works for that tradition, but I really wanted something different. Making music with other people and making it with other Asian Americans was personally important to me. I found it in the Reverend Tom Karai's group. Would you say that emphasis on group over individual, would you say that's still part of the Kumitaiko scene in North America? What do you think?
Yes and no. So, yes, because Kumitaiko literally means group taiko. Right? So, group drumming, and you can't do group drumming by yourself. So there's that automatic thing. And giving up the ego is, that always reminds me of Reverend Mastodani of Hinata Taiko, because he would say, he gave his example at one of NATC's, North American Taiko conferences. He said, well, what is Buddhist Taiko? So I play with Hinata Taiko, we get up on stage at Onodori and we play and everybody, is all excited and they clap and they cheer. And then other members of the temple are sweeping the grounds to get the garbage off the sidewalks, and other members of the temple are back flipping chickens on the barbecue pit in the smoke, and no one ever sees them. He says, so if you're the taiko player up on stage getting cheers, and you think you're more important to the temple than the guy flipping chicken in the back or the lady sweeping the sidewalk, then you have a problem with ego. And a lot of us are in the audience saying, oh, damn, that's good. But yeah, there's that thing of to be really good as a group. In a group setting, you want the group to look good. You don't want one person to stand out because, you know, they're showing off or whatever, because it breaks the group cohesiveness, right? So it is very a team thing. So that's, yes, it's still a good thing. On the other hand, we have a lot more independent individual artists, and Shoji, you know, is an independent artist. Like, he goes around and they do collaborations, you know, like with Tiffany or Kaoru or Kenny, with other musicians. Right? First time Kenny came here, he played with a trombone player.
Kenny Endo, Taiko of the Pacific.
Taiko master of
Yeah.
Hawaii. So he played with a trombone player. Kaoru wrote for a symphony orchestra in Australia a few years ago. So people are doing these things as independent artists and taiko players with taiko. So it also develops the art and takes it into new realms. So I think that's another different aspect. So I don't think you can say that taiko has to be a group thing, or that the better taiko player is the one who's an independent artist, necessarily. So I think it's just there's different ways of approaching taiko and different ways of pushing the art.
I definitely think in order to be an artist, you have to have a healthy ego. I think so. You have to, you want something. I mean, you know, it's like it is like kind of an ego-based thing to be like, oh, I don't see this thing in the world. I'm gonna bring this into the world. You know, like you need a certain amount of ego for that. But I think the way it gets, but it's not like I think that idea of like, oh, ego versus group. It's not so simple, you know, because it's like even as an independent artist, you realize like, oh, like you're supported by this community, you know, like Stan was saying, like with my group One Ensemble, like we basically could survive and we could make tours work because of this, because we could drive to Des Moines, Iowa and like stay with taiko people, and go to Lincoln, Nebraska and stay with taiko people and give workshops, and go to, you know, Chicago and Fort Wayne, Indiana, and like, you know, you could go all the way across the country and back, taking different routes, like stopping and staying with taiko people and like giving workshops. And that's like, as a touring musician, like that's like huge, right? Because then your tour cost is like zero basically, except for it just takes time, you know? You can't just like, you gotta go, you gotta hang out, you gotta like do the workshops, you know, have dinner, and it's really great, but like you just get carried by the community in so many different ways. So I think it's like, but I do think there is something to like just being appreciative of everything else around you, you know, that helps you do the thing that you do. And I honestly think like even just the drums are stupid big and annoying to get from point A to point B, you know? So even in my class, like, you know, some people have to show up early to like help move the drums across the street, and some people stay late and, you know, help pack things up and help move it away. And that's like, that to me is like the taiko spirit, you know, that's like, you know, and there's some built-in things in the practice of the art form that does encourage like a thinking of, you know, beyond oneself, I would say. I think that is really important to continue to encourage.
I agree. And that relationship with the instruments then becomes part of that community spirit. Yeah. I should say that with collegiate taiko in the US, groups never having access to good space is part of it. And like, you know, at UC Riverside, where I teach Senryu Taiko, the collegiate group, they're out there rehearsing in the parking lot in the middle of the night, you know, and that means moving the drums out there and back again, you know, all of that. So that's part of the spirit of the group, right? Is that commitment, that determination. You know, which also speaks to, you mentioned like the rise of, you know, in a relative sense, of professional taiko players, you know, and I would count you among them, absolutely. I would see you as leading the way, actually, in very principled ways, making a career as a taiko player. And that doesn't deny like the strong community base to the scene, right? You know, it just means that there are other spaces now available for our best teachers and performers and composers. This film just came out last year, Finding Her Beat, which is about 18 women taiko players, all of them at the pro level. It's an extraordinary documentary, and all of us can now watch it because it just became available a few days ago on video on demand. You can watch it on like Amazon Prime for like $1.99 or something. I urge you to watch it because it's emblematic of this shift in the scene towards, the way that certain pro taiko players in both Japan and the US want to be able to play at that level. It doesn't mean denying the community base. So can we talk a bit about that tradition versus innovation kind of, dynamic in the taiko scene? It's a false binary to my mind, but how do you two think about that? The tradition of taiko versus the ways that innovation is just continuously part of it. How do you think about this?
If I start talking, all right, not stop. Okay. I think, so, I grew up, I went through all the stages, like, when I went through a stage when I didn't want to do, I wanted to learn from the source and only do like the real taiko and go to Japan and like study with the hardcore people and like only play these like specific songs in the right way. So I totally did that. And then I totally did the opposite, which is like, I don't want to do anything that anybody has ever done before. I'm only going to do things that haven't been done. Yeah. So I went that direction, and now hopefully I'm trying to balance things a little bit better, not go so extreme one way or the other.
But Shoji, I can see the attraction of like going to Hachijo Island.
Yeah, I totally
doing that one piece,
totally.
Yeah.
And then I think in order to get anywhere, you have to do a little of that. You have to go deep into something. You really do. You have to get depth somewhere, right? I think to be if you want to do this seriously, if you want to do art, if you want to do music seriously, you got to go deep somewhere, and you can choose your somewhere, right? It doesn't have to be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. But once it's like, once you get deep enough, you start understanding like, oh, this is just the same as everything else, and then you see connections everywhere, and then that's when you start thinking like, wait, why don't we do it this way? How come we don't do why do you like this? And so I think those two things are very related, and I think there's going to be there's like maybe I think they're very related. We need to keep some of like the things that are really important, both like value-wise, but also like technique-wise in taiko. You want to have a place where those things can, and then actually those traditions are never like still, like when I was studying. I studied Edo Kotobuki Jishu, which is like a lion dance from the Tokyo area, and I had originally learned it from Kenny Endo, who had learned it in the 80s, right, when he was in Japan studying. So he brought that version to the United States and taught it all around, and so lots of people that grew up in the North American taiko scene learned some version from him. And then when I went back to Tokyo and did it, they were like, why are you playing this old version? And I was like, oh, that's like so 80s, we don't play it like that anymore. We play it like, this pattern is like this. So even these like things that you think are really, really traditional, they're not standing still. They're constantly being, interpreted and changing with the times and all that kind of stuff. So they're, even those things that maintain a certain shape, a certain form, they're getting deeper. There's more generations of musicians doing it, and it's getting to gets a really interesting and profound place. But then for me, I guess I always one of the things is like when I was growing up playing taiko, I would do a performance and people would come up and be like, oh, where in Japan are you from? And I thought, like, originally I would get really pissed at that question, be like, no, I'm from here, blah, 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 blah. But I realized it's like I was setting off a lot of like markers, like kind of, like using a little of that, like, oh, dressing like, to like kind of, so I don't think you could blame people to like asking those questions, So then I started thinking, oh, well, what if I played a kind of music where I would never get that question? You know, it would be so clear, like where I was coming from, like my influences, you know, all that wouldn't ever be a question that somebody asked me, you know? So that was one of the reasons for doing the one-on-one thing.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I do that. We're not going to necessarily go there, but I do think the whole sort of audience inclination, some audiences' inclination to read all of this, not as Asian American, but as Chinese, is a problem. You know, I do blame people for that. I think it's racist, but but we're talking about tradition and innovation. I do want to hear what you think.
Yeah, well, so when we talk about tradition, I always think the Northwest here is very rich in indigenous culture. There's a lot of indigenous artists, and I had the fortune of having a good friend who was indigenous artist, so she introduced me to other people. And one of them was a mask maker. And so there's a long tradition of making masks out of wood and feathers and other natural products in the Northwest. But this artist started making them out of things like hubcaps and spokes out of wheels instead of whiskers off a walrus. And so using, I guess you call it contemporary materials. And he got criticized by largely non-indigenous people for not being, you know, traditional. This isn't traditional. And so he's saying, well, whose tradition are you talking about? And what makes it traditional? Because I'm using the same methods, the same techniques, I'm just using different materials. And it reminds me of another story of this woman. The story goes that there's this woman who always made this delicious pot roast, and she would always cut the ends off the pot roast before she puts it in the oven. And one day, her son asks her, like, Mom, why do you cut the ends off the pot roast? And she said, well, because it always tastes, because that's how my mother did it, and it always tastes so good. And so then, the next time Grandma came over, we asked Grandma, did you cut the ends off the pot roast when you cooked it? And she said, yeah, I did. I said, why did you do that? I said, well, we had a really small oven, and it wouldn't fit. So I had to cut the ends off. So the point of that is that, you know, tradition, just because it's always been done that way, doesn't necessarily mean that there's a good reason for doing it that way, or that there's an artistic reason for doing it that way. Like we learned Fukushima Ondo, in Fukushima, and they used these really weird bachi, like they're really short and kind of fat. And so when they went back to Shikuma, one of the old guys just brought out some branches that they had broken off of an apple tree. He said, well, because in the old days, you know, we didn't bother to make bachi, we just tore a branch off and we used it. And so then it became these little funny, short, steady bachi. So I think we can over-idealize tradition. On the other hand, there are, you know, regional styles like chichibu, yatabayashi, or hachijo, or miyake that have a specific form, and there's a specific reason why they have that form. And so it's good to know the history behind it and why it looks that way. And if you want to maintain that regional style, then you still got to do it that way, even though the reason may not exist for you anymore.
Yeah. Wow, so I hear both of you sort of coming down on the side of, you know, tradition is as tradition was, but change is going to be part of this tradition.
Well, the other thing is, like, kumidaiko really didn't exist before the 1950s. It's a post-war
I was hoping you
invention in the 1950s. Gucci Sensei of Suidaiko, and then was one of the big innovators, and then Ueros Kuroku, developed using the slant stand, which didn't really exist or wasn't hardly used by anybody in Japan before they started doing that. Come out of the bone tradition in the Tokyo area. And then you get like Ondakaza and Kodo, and the famous Odaiko solo and Undoshi, Odaiko. That's not traditional. That was invented in Paris, France, for one concert that was always doing. So it's kind of like we can grab onto things and say that, well, this is traditional because this group that I know of that's very famous did it this way. But it may not necessarily be. And then on the other hand, there's innovation. So like Shoji is one of the big innovators, I think, in the Taiko world. Collaborates with all kinds of stuff. He tries all this crazy stuff. And I asked him about this before. He's gotten pushback. People saying, well, I didn't Taiko. You're getting away from Taiko. And I asked Kenny once, like, I asked a group, and Kenny was in the group, then the question was, what is Taiko? So I said, okay, so what if Madonna came on stage and pulled the big drum, or big Odaiko on a telescope, and started tapping it with her fingers? Would that be Taiko? And like most of the group said, no, that's not Taiko. And then I said, well, what if Eitetsu Hayashi is probably the most famous Taiko player in the world?
Invented Odaiko, basically.
Yeah. What if he came on stage and he started tapping the Taiko with his fingers? Would that be Taiko? So, yeah, that would be Taiko. And then Kenny said, no, wait a minute. I think Madonna tapping is Taiko as well as Eitetsu. Even though traditional, we would get it with the bachi.
I think it's also like one of the reasons why those words are like kind of, there's a lot of unintended meaning when you use the word like tradition, You might mean this one thing, but because you use that word, you get all this other stuff, So I think I try to think of it more like can I find out the reason why people do things this way or have done things this way? Because usually if you ask like that, then like you can get to something really interesting, You can get to something really deep, really interesting from that area, from that region, from that specific group or from that specific style. But I think and I think it can be good to like develop something deeply like that. That's awesome. But then you don't want it to like get in the way of like your own creative process, or not, and by extension, and not just your own creative process, but your group's creative process, or or the community's creative process, right? That's when it's like all these kind of like negative aspects of, or what I can consider negative aspects of tradition, like people self-censoring and people, like letting the insecurities and like the other things like get in the way of like actually doing something interesting, Like I would much rather people like push the boundary and like, do something crazy. Like that's way more
safety in doing tradition.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of self-censorship as a musician, as an artist that can happen, and and that can happen then you get a bunch of people together, and then there's like another layer of that. So I think, I think we should look to tradition as something where, like ask like, oh, why is it done that way? Can I think about it? Can I discover interesting things about it? But don't, and then let that like empower something interesting, like instead of like cutting out, like defining this thing that you're doing, because it really is just, it's pretty simple. It's just like a drum, like there's so many different things that we can do.
Spoken like an innovator, because you want to see what's next. You want to see what's, what new things coming down the road for Taiko. And me, I worry about the moment when Taiko just becomes drumming. When it's no longer Taiko, you know, and when and where is that? Like, you know, and there's no consciousness of kata at all. And that just goes out the window, you know. When it becomes completely cut off from Japanese American culture, community, and history. Oh, that's a problem for me. You know, so I mean, I can't follow you where you're going utterly and completely. I can walk with you on that road up to a point.
Okay, let me see if I can make you feel better. Okay, because if we, one, I do think Taiko has to grow outside of the, because, you know, like, has its roots in Japan, and, you know, we've developed a certain, like, version of it here in North America. And even that is like a, you know, it's an expansion, right? It's one step away from that. And so the next logical step is like another one like that and another. And Taiko, whether we like it or not, is gonna grow in communities that that aren't connected to any kind of like Japanese or Japanese American or even Asian population.
Oh, it's already happening.
It's already happening, yeah. So like we have to embrace that change, you know, we have to. And so that's when it comes down to like, we have to think through the things that we think are important, you know? So if like the way you hold your body is important, then it almost forces us to be deeper with it, you know? Because like, I can get somebody like Stan, somebody with like a Japanese body type, you know, short, stocky, you know? Like you can have a rather not very deep understanding of your center and like how you hold your body, and you can get somebody with a similar body type to look good on a type. But it takes a lot to be able to get a bunch of super different body types to express this thing in a different way, you know? Like, and so I have really felt that, like, I feel like I've gotten my understanding of like the real core, the super basics of Taiko has gotten a lot stronger because I've had to teach so many different kinds of people from all around the world, you know? Like friggin' tall ass like Germans and like, you know, super skinny, like, you know, it's like, there's like so many different, like the range of like human bodies is like incredible and beautiful, right? But do you understand this thing deep enough that you can get it to like get people to realize these things, these concepts in their own bodies, and then they have to do it in a way that I don't understand, you know, because I don't have that long arm, you know, like, or I'm not that, or, you know, like my body is shaped differently. So it's really forced me to think through some of those like really core concepts even, and get to even deeper understanding of it, so that like, yeah, and so I feel like that there's a process where like there's a possible future out there where like it goes far beyond the community it started with, but it's even deeper, even stronger.
I want to hear Stan's response, and then I'd like to go to some audience.
Yeah, and Taiko stands are not adjustable. So if you're 6'3" or 5', you play on this. It's the same stand, same height. So, yeah, so you go deeper. Tom folks gotta go deeper. Yeah. Well, so I think Taiko as an art form has really developed, and we've gone through a lot of different things, because in the beginning we didn't know what the hell we were doing, so we were looking to folks like Tanaka Sensei to tell us this is what Taiko is. And as we got more developed in our experience and our abilities, we got, technically we got better. We started incorporating more ideas, musical ideas, and taking, doing collaborations and trying new things out. I think we developed a bigger palette, not just a bigger repertoire, but a bigger palette of things that we can do with the drum. And both situationally as well as musically. And I think that's that's a natural progression. And now we have professional taiko players. I mean, frankly, in the 80s, we didn't have anybody who was worth being a professional taiko player yet. And, so Kenny was one of the early ones to break through, and then Tiffany.
It was very small number.
Yeah, a small number of really high caliber people. So now we have dozens,
dozens,
if not hundreds around the world. We're at that level, and I'm not, but we as a community are trying different things, and part of it is, maintaining traditional things and learning how to do things in a traditional way. And there is a form, and there is a better way to hit a drum, and there's kind of bad ways to hit a drum. Like either it'll result in injury to the drummer or injury to the player, or it just doesn't look good. So, and, there are community groups where it doesn't matter. The whole object is to enjoy yourself, to have fun. And whether you look good or even sound good, it doesn't matter that much. But when you're a performing group where you're actually going out on stage and doing something for an audience, and not just for yourself, then I think you have a responsibility to up the level, right? Especially if they're going to pay money to see you, or they're going to pay you for your performance. Then you need to be providing something that's worth it. So there's a lot that we've done to develop and change, and I think that's going to continue.
Thank you. That's coming through very clearly from both of you. Yeah. In our remaining time, let's turn to the audience. What do you think? Let's see if you have questions, or maybe the house lights. Could you bring them up so we can? There you are. Yeah. We welcome questions or responses of any kind, and we should probably have you come up and speak into a mic if you're willing, not least so that lively people can actually hear what's going on. Don't be shy. Would you mind coming up?
Yeah, I don't mind.
And if you don't mind, say your name.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and thank you for being here today. I am a classical percussionist, and there is a piece I always run into called, I think it might be called Hudaiko. I think it's pronounced Hodaiko, but it is, I think a lot of people in the community call it Hudaiko. So there's this percussion ensemble piece called Hudaiko, and it's frequently played on drums. So I'm assuming it's a lot of similar patterns of Hodaiko, but it's transcribed on paper. So all these students learn this by paper. There is no movement, there's no choreography. It's just the rhythms of Hodaiko. And I don't know if it's an infamous piece or not, but what are your views on this? Playing the Hodaiko maybe patterns, but on classical percussion toms instead, because a lot of schools don't have taiko drums. What are your views on this, negative or positive?
It's awesome. That's nice. I like all that stuff, Yeah, there's some like Western, like coming like from a Western percussion point of view, forays into the crossover into the Taiko Kai that get very, very interesting. There's a what's the name? Circle percussion, or I'm gonna mess this up. Anyway, they were like classically trained Western percussionists that kind of got into taiko. They released a bunch of albums in like the maybe mid-90s or something. That stuff was awesome. And then there's I'm gonna mess up all these names, but there was Tetsubo Naito. He's one of the members, or a former member of Koa, but he wrote this really interesting piece that was in 7/4. And that one has gotten, I've seen like classically trained percussionists like do a version of that. So that's like people kind of hearing a taiko thing and like, translating it to, and that I've seen versions of that are really cool. There's been a couple percussion professor has taken omiyage and like played it on a bunch of toms and floor toms and stuff. Kids are like and they do the whole thing. Yeah, it's like they can't move at all, but it's like it's awesome, Yeah, so I love all that stuff. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
I have a question. Should I be coming up?
Yeah, just for the remote viewers.
We are live streaming, so the live stream can see you if you're up here, and they can hear you if you use the mic.
Hello, I'm Jennifer. I'm part of Taiko Kai. So I'm pretty new to Taiko. I've been playing for a little under 3 years now, almost 3 years. And one of the things I've noticed about Taiko is, at least from as far as my knowledge extends, it was traditionally taught very orally, so usually using kuchi shoga and stuff. And one of the things I found fascinating is seeing that tug of war between like how do we notate, how do we pass on Taiko in the community? Do we write kuchi shoga sheets and sometimes we don't have people to continue teaching and we don't want like these songs to get lost? Do we resort to Western music? Since oral traditions tend to be very fluid and are like very prone to change and stuff, does that allow for innovation, et cetera, et cetera? And it's just something that I've heard a lot of debate about where some people are very anti-Western music and very anti-writing stuff down, like, no, kuchi shoga only, and some people like Kodo has all their music written down using Western music notation. And I was just kind of curious, since we were talking about tradition, what your guys' thoughts were on this situation of like kuchi shoga versus Western music versus some in between of how like Taiko is taught, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah, that's a big debate. So yeah, traditionally, Taiko, at least, well, see, then we get into the. So traditionally, if you go to like gagaku or hogaku, the music of orchestral music of Japan, or theater music, like for kabuki or no. They have a notation, they write stuff down. So like, Edo Kotobuki Jushi is written down in a notation. It isn't Western notation, but it is a written notation. And there is also the kuchi shoga that goes with it. So basically they're writing kuchi shoga 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 on a sheet, but it's like, divided into 8, 8 because it's an 8 count thing, and then move to the next line. And it's, right to left and top to bottom. So there is notation that has been used in Japan. The thing about kumi daiko, we largely, with these big drums, come out of the matsuri, the festival music of Japan, which was more the peasant music, and so the peasants didn't write stuff out, and so it was all oral. So, you learn it, you say it, and then you can play it. It's the old saying. So you learn it by repeating the don, the don, the don, the don, the don, the don, and you just learn that to say it, and then you can play it on the drum. So there's tradition on both sides, actually. In my group, we like to teach the kuchi shoga, but I will also write the kuchi shoga out in Romaji, so I can read it, and I put it in, 8 columns of 8, and try to notate it that way. And some members in our group are Western trained musically, so they'll transcribe it into Western notation. So I think, for me, whatever works, but I think as a basic, everybody needs to know kuchi shoga, and because if a teacher comes in and they say, okay, we're going to play this thing, the first number is 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. If you don't understand what that means, or you have trouble with it, then you're going to be lost. So you need to be able to do the kuchi shoga. I'm not against writing it out in some other form, but I think the basic Taiko players need to have the kuchi shoga as well.
I always think it's like, why is it an either or question? How come it's not an and question? You know? Like there's huge advantages to Western notation. One, a lot of people know it, you know? Like you can just write something out, you can show another musician, and they can be like, boom, I got it. You know? Like that's great. Why don't we use that? You know? And then for, like I didn't grow up, you know, I grew up in the taiko world, so I had to, you know, when I had to like learn all that, to, you know, because I was like, this stick thing doesn't make no freaking sense, you know? And then, but it's very useful, right? You can communicate ideas very quickly to a bunch of trained musicians, and who doesn't want to play with trained musicians? That's awesome, right? So, but I think, but it's not like, but I think both systems have different, like they're good at different things. You know, like one of the things I think is really important about Kuchishoka is, I don't think Kuchishoka is awesome at like writing out rhythms, you know? Like I think honestly, like just your Western notation is like way more efficient, right? Because you can just 10 tika 10, you don't have to write 10 teke, 10, you know, it's like becomes this long thing. Yeah, except you could put it in like this little, you know. So, but where I think Kuchishoka is really important is like, it's much more than just a way of learning a rhythm. It's a way of trying to internalize the patterns, and it's an easy way of practicing intentionality. You know, and like a lot of taiko is about that. It's about like, not just like, it's not like, you know, taiko you're supposed to like stand at the drum. And when you stand at the drum, you're supposed to like stand at the drum, you know, not just stand at the drum. You want to stand at the drum. You know, when you hit the dawn, you want to hit a dawn. You just want to hit a dawn, you know? And so like, Kuchishoka is like a great, very easy way of practicing that intentionality, right? If you say, don, doko, don, don, like I never let my students get away with that. Like, what are we doing? That's not it. That's not the sound. It's like, oh no, I did it right. Don, doko, don, don. It's like, no, it's not don, doko, don, don. It's don, doko, don, don. You know, like you just shape those words. You like make it clear where you're gonna hit in space. You try to make the taiko sound. Don, right? Not don or don, you know? Don. And so like Kuchishoka is like a really good way of like starting that process of practicing some amount of intentionality. And you know, that's hard to get in just a score, whether it's written out in whether it's Kuchishoka written out or Western notation written out. You know, you have to be in the room, you have to hear, you have to feel how that sound resonates in the room, you know? Like that's where Kuchishoka is really, really powerful. And so I think, I always think it's like a and. You know, so if you don't do Kuchishoka, do Kuchishoka. If you can't read Western notation, I'm like, come on, it's not that hard. Just like put in a little time. Figure out, you know, 16th notes, quarter notes, dotted quarters, that's all you need in taiko. Come on, quit being lazy.
And I would just say that it's really useful to be able to read Western notation, because like last year I did a collaboration, a friend of mine wrote a piece for taiko, sanshin, and string quartet. So it was all written in Western notation. So like if I wasn't able to read Western notation, then I wouldn't have been able to play with the string quartet. So, you know, it's really useful at times.
I have thoughts on this too, but we actually just got a question from one of our remote viewers.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know, I'm excited. So thank you, Gregory, for passing it along. Here's the question. Hi, my name is Kara, C-A-R-A, Kara, and I'm playing with Jitan Daiko in San Francisco. I feel so much knowledge, history, and wisdom from your words. I am inspired by the ways that your music practice and political advocacy are intertwined. I also fear the moment where, quote, taiko becomes just drumming, unquote. How do you think we continue carrying our Asian American political legacy through our music as taiko evolves? I think this is a question for you, Stan.
Yeah, well, I think intentionality is a big part of it, is what is it that you are trying to do with your taiko, with what you're playing? not just what you're playing and how you're playing, but also who you're playing for or why you're playing. So, like this last week, we had Dekoboko Taiko opening the program at the Puyallup Fairground for Day of Remembrance. And then members of Northwest Taiko opened the second half at the Northwest Detention Center. So you can choose where you want to play, who you want to play for, and you can develop songs. So like, some of the songs that I've written are like, Matsutake Mama was one. So it was based on the movements of hunting for Matsutake. And it opened with like a dance where we were kind of weaving our way onto the stage, and then we started playing on the drums. Another piece was called Alamogordo. It was written for the Hiroshima Hope program, and it's about the building of the atomic bomb. So inspiration was and diagrams of electrons circling. So I was trying to create the arm movements so it would mimic those Venn diagrams of the atomic electrons circling the nucleus. And then it speeds up as you get to critical mass, and then there's an explosion at the end. Get into the second section, everyone dies on stage, but that was a Buto part. So you can incorporate, political ideas into the pieces you create, and yeah, different ways of putting meaning into the music.
Yeah. And
Can I just sort of say that, yeah, I'd love to see those pieces, quite frankly. They sound really powerful. I'm sure they are powerful. There are pieces that actually are explicitly political in intent, and can change people and communities as a result. There's a book called, written by Angela Algren called Drumming Through Asian America, and Angie, last name's spelled A-H-L-G-R-E-N. Amazing book. She's not Asian American herself, but she argues that through playing, and she did most of her playing in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in a setting that wasn't Asian American, right? She argues that musicians learn about Asian America through playing taiko, and I think that's a really powerful idea. Yeah, it's another way of taiko being still part of Japanese American community and beyond, right? It's a way where even if the pieces themselves are not explicitly political, something political is happening. I find that very powerful as an idea.
I have something to say on this. I think, I definitely feel like my work in the taiko community, that is my version of activism, It's, we all have to find our lane when it comes to activism, and ideally we're all just moving in the same direction, which is try to do what you can with the influence that you have to make the world a slightly better place, right? That's the base. And I think, but I feel even what it means to be Asian American, our family came from Japan a long time ago and right up here, and we've been very assimilated, but it goes the opposite way too, In the taiko community, we're the ones doing the assimilation, You come into our, the community, and there's a way where we can preserve some of the values that we found to be helpful and strong in our community. And it's our way of passing it back and assimilate, changing culture very slowly through our own community and through growing this community and inviting more people into it and having them come in and be changed by it, So it's this, we often think of this Americanization or, assimilation thing as this one-way street, but it doesn't, it goes both ways, And this is our way of being able to go back.
Yeah, so taiko is really become part of the mainstream. I mean, when we started, you couldn't find Taiko unless you went to a Japanese American community at a one time in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. But now it's like, you know, Cirque du Soleil is doing Taiko in Las Vegas in one of their shows. And Taiko has become kind of a standard, another standard instrument for Hollywood movies. You know, now you can, if you listen carefully, you can hear Taiko in a lot of soundtracks, you know, commercials and movies and stuff. So it's become kind of another tool that professional musicians are using in all these different settings, which, you know, then you can get into questions of appropriation, cultural appropriation, ripping things off. But I think it's become more widespread. And, you know, I think most people know when you say Taiko, they have some idea of what we're talking about.
I'm feeling like we should begin to wind things up.
Yeah.
I love the note in which we just ended, which is that in coming to Taiko, anyone enters a different kind of space, you know, and hopefully are open to being changed by it, right? You know? And that means, you know, depending on where you're coming from, who you want to be, you know, that can mean learning something about Japanese Americans and Asian Americans. It can mean that. What I am tonight is just grateful to spend the time with the two of you. Yeah, it's a gift and a half. It's a Mamiage. Yeah, and to hear Taiko Kai play tonight was just, oh my God, you just made me so happy. And I thank you for that, for your artistry, for your clear sense of community. And thank you, of course, to the University of Washington and many units that helped make this possible. And a huge deep felt thanks to the Taiko Community Alliance for making the live stream possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we give a hand to our panelists of the Taiko Kai?